the video is running, so you can begin.
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to be here. We've got 6 or 7 board members. We have Al coming second. We also have staff and we have guests. Mr. Secretary, would you do me honor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Calling the roll.
Please put a board meeting.
Chairman Frank.
I'm here.
Member Ketchum, Fernandez Ketchum.
Here.
Member Freed.
Here.
Member Golden.
Here.
Member Sue. Member Shaw.
Here.
Member Zaridi.
Here.
Okay. We have 4, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Al. Thank you very much. We're fortunate today to have many of the senior people of DEP here. We welcome Commissioner Agarwala. We welcome Executive Director of the Board and Chief Financial Officer of DEP, Joseph Buren. Jeff Lynch is here. He is Deputy Commissioner of
Consumer Service.
Okay. Consumer Services. We have our legal counsel is here today, Al Rodriguez, also the board secretary. We have with us today Omar Nazem, who joins us and who is a lifeline for this board. And we have David Loman, who is the head of the Municipal Water Finance Authority, and the guy who generates much of the money that we require to keep the infrastructure going. David, thank you for doing that. I'll get right to the agenda. The first resolution requires that we vote on the approval of the minutes of the March 3rd meeting. Do I have a motion? Let me ask the question first. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any questions?
No.
Hearing none. May I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
Thank you very, very much. Is there a second?
Second.
John, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the resolution to approve the minutes passes unanimously. The next agenda item is a presentation. We are favored today to have Commissioner Agarwala here. Thank you for being here. It's an important presentation for this board. Looking forward to hearing it.
Thank you. Omar, are you
So good morning, and thank you all. As you know, today is an important meeting of the board because we are here to present to you our proposal for rates for next year. And obviously, over the next several weeks, we will be doing presentations and hearings, and a few weeks after that, you will have to vote on those. But there is, as you know, a lot of context here. We as an agency have been very focused on keeping you apprised and getting your help on our efforts to protect the ratepayers, even in an environment that's significantly increased in inflation. And what I wanted to report on this morning before we go into the specifics of our rate proposal is some of the context around what we are doing. And first, you know, it wouldn't be a political appointee if I didn't want to take a victory lap on some good press we've had. And one thing I hope you all saw the article in the New York Times 2 weeks ago now at this point, talking about the important role that DEP plays in the city's organics work. I'm pleased that after a decade of work, and in fact this is something that was mentioned in the first plan YC going back to 2007, that the gas to grid system at Newtown Creek is now operational, which means that all of the food waste and the sewage that's taken to Newtown Creek is, in addition to the fact that we do beneficially use a large portion of the biosolids, 75% of the weight of a piece of organic material, banana peel, the apple core, whatever you put in your compost or is picked up in your organics collection in Queens, is becoming biogas, and 80% of the rest of it is being beneficial. We'll get to 100%. There's work to be done there, but it's really exciting and I think a major contribution. A great collaboration with the Department of Sanitation.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm really the only person in the world without a New York Times subscription. I would love if you could circulate that.
Sure.
You know, you used to get like 10 free articles a month, and now it's like you click on it, no thing. No offense, I love the New York Times.
Sure, we can do that without violating any law, right? We'll get to that. Next, I'm sure several of you also know that a week and a half ago, the Adams administration rolled out Plan YC, which is the next edition of the city's mandatory sustainability plan that's required by the city council. Started with the two Plan YCs of the Bloomberg administration, then Department of Leadership with members. Really, it broadened its scope. It's called One NYC and the Bloomberg administration. Mayor Adams determined to bring it back to a focus on sustainability, and in part that's the reason for the return to the older name. But DEP plays a significant role in the new plan. We are, as you've probably seen, the mayor has directed us to stand up a new Bureau of Coastal Resilience. So DEP will be playing a leading role in coordinating and managing many of the city's coastal resilience efforts. We are going to be working over the summer with other agencies and with outside stakeholders to really shape what that bureau will look like. But the job of Deputy Commissioner for Coastal Resilience has already been posted. The other thing that I will call the Water Board's attention to here is a commitment we have made to start exploring what it would take to get to a world of zero combined sewer overflows. As you know, a large portion of our capital budget is to comply with the long-term control plans, which we agreed upon with the state, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and that govern a great deal of DEP's capital commitments. In fact, more than the next 10 years. In some ways, they go out, they envision work to take us to 2040. However, even when all of those projects are completed, there will still be probably on the order of something like 10 billion gallons of combined sewer overflows every year. And we think it is time voluntarily to start work to figure out what it would take to get from 10 to 0. Inevitably, the last 10 are going to be the most expensive. We do not know what this will require. It may be something that we all look at the cost and decide maybe it's not worth it. But I think it's important for DEP to play a leading role ahead of requirements, ahead of regulation, and start to explore what this would involve. So those are two significant things that came out of Plan YC. There's a whole list of others. Over the last couple of months since we've seen you, I think DEP has had a pretty good run. One of our most important things is, as you know, we have a significant number of vacancies. I'm pleased to report that we've made significant progress. DEP is now 100 people bigger than it was when we last met, which is a big deal because not only have we been hiring at an aggressive rate, but we've also been able to keep our retentions down. And so that is a net number. That is something that we are focused on, and goal setting that we did as a senior team. I have a personal goal of reducing the city's net vacancy rate by 25%, and all of the senior members of the team have an interlocking goal for their bureaus. So we're all very focused on this. It is still a challenge. There are still headwinds. As you know, the city is not always the most attractive competitive employer, but nonetheless, I think we are an increasingly good place to work with an aggressive agenda and getting a response to the on the bottom left, as you see, as we've mentioned to you, we have, pursuant to the authorization you gave us at the end of last year, engaged with McKinsey & Company to do a strategic plan that is underway later in the year. As we committed to you, we will have an update for you on that. On the top right, as you know, the city concluded the first major labor settlement with DC 37, which we are all expecting sets the pattern. And now that we have an expectation for what our labor agreements will be, that is now baked into our budget over the next several years. And as you can imagine, that is one of our largest areas of And the good news is we are continuing, and I am grateful both for Joe's leadership as CFO and for Jeff's as Deputy Commissioner of Customer Service, for the work that we've done to continue to build. The good news is we are doing quite well. That's all being an important moment. The amnesty is doing exactly what we had expected. We are well over plan for the year. And our expectation is that that will only get better. And in fact, as you know, in the rate hike, we are counting on that to get better because that allows us not to raise rates as much as we otherwise might have. So in any case, so that's the quick update. Happy to pause for any questions on those things before we shift to the capital budget. All right, this is a big calendar year for us. As you know, last year we had to delay the shut off and the cut in of the bypass tunnel for the Delaware Aqueduct, another 10-year project. It's been going on for a very long time. The reason for that delay last year had to do with our concern not about the construction itself, but about the preparation we were doing to make sure that even during a 6 to 8 month period when the city did not have access to the 50% of the water supply in the Delaware watershed, that we would have an uninterrupted and completely reliable supply of water to everyone in New York City. We came very close last year, but there were a handful of things we wanted to get perfectly right. And so that's why we did the delay. There were some changes we made to the filtration plant. Those were of particular concern. I'm pleased to say that particularly in February and March, there were a number of tests run. Everything exceeded performance expectations. And so right now we are fully expecting that we would do that this fall. The target would be October to turn off the Delaware Aqueduct. We have also started doing a series of educational forums upstate where some of the people in the watershed are concerned about what it might mean for flooding if we are not drawing down water and those Delaware reservoirs are at a full or near full capacity. We have a whole set of plans for how we are going to do everything possible to make sure that that doesn't happen, but that is part of our outreach. And so we will keep you posted on that, but again, right now, it looks like all systems should go.
Hey, just 2 comments on that. I think we're laughing about this. I'm actually, well, although I look the youngest, I'm the longest board member. I think it would be really great for the benefit of some of the new board members, because it's been a very long time since we've talked about what this actually means and what we're actually doing here. And I think that would be really good for us to just revisit these like larger capital projects, the bypass, why we're bypassing, what was happening, and what the impact is. And then 2, I think it's been a really long time again for the benefit of some of the newer board members if we actually just do another field trip where we kind of take a look at the size and the scale of what the agency does. I think it's important that the board gets to like actually visualize and see the dynamic work that the agency does. I think it makes this work much more fulfilling and just like makes it more concrete. So those are just my 2 things. Happy to do that.
Commissioner? I'm just curious to know whether we're looking at the front of that behemoth.
The front. And that is, I do not claim to be the civil engineer on the road, but those are the cutting wheels.
Okay.
Do the excavation. Of course, this is an old picture because the boring machine is long since gone since the tunnel was
Complete, right.
But, the other thing, and I think several of you know already, that we announced a few months ago what we expect to be the final schedule for the final stage of the completion of the third water tunnel. Construction will be complete in 2027. We expect the full Brooklyn Beach section of water tunnel number 3 to be in service in 2030. As you would imagine, after construction takes place, there's still a lot of equipment that has to be installed, a number of steps before the system goes into service. But that is well underway. You may know Mayor Adams visited the site in Astoria, where we have one of the 2 shafts that remain. And at that point, it was about 100 feet down. I happened to visit the site a couple of weeks ago, and we were at 170 feet, I believe. So we're making real progress. Of course, we've got to get to 700. So that's why it'll take a while. And there are 2 final shafts, but we're very excited about this. And then just one final update, although I'll ad-lib on another one because it's worth mentioning. We have work underway at the Hunts Point treatment plant. Among the things that we are doing is really turning this plant into, much like we have at Newtown Creek, turning it into a sustainability hub. It is close to the Hunts Point produce market, the terminal market rather. And one of the things that our new digesters that we are constructing there, they are designed to be able to accept the food waste from the market, as well as augment the Newtown Creek plant's ability to take food waste from its citywide organic disposal system. Along those lines, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we issued an RFEI where we had asked the private sector for expressions of interest in working with us on gas to grid. The economics of gas to grid are very different from what they were a decade ago when we started work on the Newtown Creek plant. I think the economics of that Newtown Creek project probably mean it will not have cost EEP any money, but we will probably not gain a lot from it. I think there is a much greater opportunity for agreements that we look at today, where we can get private investment in the gas to grid portion of what we need to build to be that full partner on organics. I'm very excited about that. One of the things that will help us do is not only finance the capture and the reuse of biogas, but also it will help us electrify some of our plants, because one of the things we know is that even in those plants where we are not flaring, but in fact using the biogas on the site, that still means we've got a lot of point source combustion going on. And of course, 13 of our 14 treatment plants are in environmental justice neighborhoods. And so anything we can do not to have emissions on site is something that's important. And the final thing I'll mention, we don't have a slide on, but I was very pleased that the mayor came along with Lisa Garcia, the regional administrator for the EPA, to announce the groundbreaking of our work at Kiwanis Canal. Another project that's been underway, or a collection of projects that's been underway, and contentious over the last several years. It's a grand total of about $1.4 billion that DEP will be investing in reducing combined sewer overflows and creating public space in and around that neighborhood. There are 2 major sites there, and we are now under construction at both. It's really exciting. Even more exciting to a certain extent is that those projects had been an issue of great disagreement with the EPA, and over the last year, our team has worked really closely with EPA so that we can announce those as a joint, effectively celebration. And I think the EPA has been quite complimentary of the work that DEP is doing in the time frame that we are now on. Our folks at the Bureau of Engineering, Design, and Construction have been tremendously creative in developing ways to accommodate the aggressive schedules that the EPA wanted to see. And I think we are on schedule to meet EPA's ambitions there.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the next slide, everyone, is a quick recap of the capital plan for fiscal years 23 through 31.3 billion. This is basically, mirroring what the mayor just released last week as the executive budget, and building on what the commissioner said. This includes those projects you just spoke about, Kiwanis, Hunts Point, in the water pollution area, sewers. There's a large number of projects in there related to stormwater controls, outbursts, related to some of the things we're seeing as we have the climate change issues there. So this is a very large capital program, obviously, and also very aggressive in that we're probably hitting close to, many years, $3 billion, and we're going to be over $3 billion when you start getting out into later years. That's a challenge for us, and we're working to rise to that challenge. The administration has been initiating a number of capital reforms to make the capital process go smoother, not just for DEP, but for many of the other city agencies. And under the commissioner's leadership, we've also started to put through a number of reforms internally as well to make our own processes work much more smoothly. So there's a lot in here. It's needed. Of course, you can always provide more details to the members, to, as specific projects and how this is flowing through and how this, feeds into the entire projection.
Just one question here.
Sure.
Of the 31 billion, what of it is sort of, because I know before we used to see the breakdown between what is mandated by the EPA, so that, I think it's important to contextualize that some of the spending is not voluntary, some of it is mandatory. So it'd be interesting.
Right now, 6.5, or about 20% is mandated out of that $31 billion. So it's still a significant portion, but it's gone down a little bit over the years.
I could add, I'd like to add two points to that. One directly to your point, Arlene. I think we should be clear with ourselves that a higher share of mandated is not good.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we should be driving our own priorities, and the more mandates that are imposed on us, that's an indication that we are not meeting regulatory standards. So I would certainly be my ambition to have that go down over time, much like I was saying about getting ahead of combined sewer overflows. I'd like to do what we've agreed on with the state, and then see how we can do even more, with the ambition that over time we don't need to be under those standards.
And I think if I recall correctly, that's actually what the agency has been doing. This number was a lot larger. I mean, I've been here more than a decade, and that was a much more significant chunk. So excited to see that it has been doing that all of the work that we have been doing over the last decade to sort of be in front of the environmental concerns has taken the EPA off our back. So I'm excited to see that sort of decrease.
The other thing I'll point out, as Joe said, we are looking at a capital plan that is far more front-loaded than back-loaded, which is really exciting. Reflects the mayor's commitment to investment in the water system. As Joe said, it will be a challenge, and you will recall it's something that we've talked about, I've talked about with you in the last couple of meetings, our need to ensure that we can invest all the money we have. In fiscal year 22, we left money on the table because we could not spend the money that was in our budget. We left actually about $500 million in unspent capital. This year, we have a $2.2 billion capital budget. I'm pleased to say that we are pretty much tracking at about 100%. We've been watching that one. I described in one of our previous meetings some of the work that we've done to gain much better internal visibility into our procurement processes. We have actually reduced our average procurement time by 25% in only 1 year, which I'm very proud of, and I know, I think, it's our first water board meeting. I think Marissa Moray, who's joined DEP last summer, has been in charge of all of those efforts. It's an amazing job. So we are, as I like to say, we're an agency that's going to the gym. We have a marathon of capital plan ahead of us, and we are getting ready for it.
One quick question. The $500 million that you said was left on the table, is that money that literally was not rolled into the budget and you didn't have access to it? Or is that just your capital commitment rate was less than you expected?
We did roll into the next year.
Right, okay. Yeah, thank you.
But just,
No, it's an important-
we're trying to get ahead of that cycle, so we're not having to constantly playing catch up.
That's right.
That's one of the things.
It's rolled, but it doesn't all, there's a real price to underspend.
Of course, escalation and everything else.
And it gets rolled
Yeah.
over the life of the capital plan. It doesn't all stick around for next January. You can ask our colleagues from all of the surrounding us.
To the extent we have challenges in deploying the full amount of the committed capital, does that tend to be largely a product of the agency being short-staffed, of conditions in the private market? What drives that challenge?
So it's, unfortunately, of course, it's a host of things. And some of it was very much exacerbated by two things that happened, particularly one, of course, was the pandemic, which changed all sorts of things for all sorts of people. But in addition, in 2021, the city that contributed to it. The good news is I think we're starting to see the benefits of that system. So as with anything, there was a cost, there was a learning curve, and now that tool with the standardization and transparency that it was designed to bring, we are now seeing some of the benefits there. I think frankly, we also, in several cases, allowed just some unnecessary delays to accumulate, and these things do accumulate. And so among the things that Marissa has done is identify sequential processes that could actually take place in parallel, and you can save a lot of time when they are not actually hinging on each other, and you can make things parallel. We are looking at areas where there might be redundant reviews and trying to identify where we can eliminate some of those. So there's a variety of things, but one of the most important things really is just having the transparency so we know where everything is in what is really an 18-month process. So we can now, with much greater clarity, predict when a given contract is likely to be registered. And notice to proceed might be realized. We've also been working very hard, and again, something Marissa and I have been doing together. I've spoken to, I don't know, at least half a dozen construction industry events over the last 2 or 3 weeks to communicate this, because with our increasing capital plan, we need to make sure that the construction industry is excited about bidding on DEP work. That will make sure that we don't have a problem in finding construction partners. It will keep our costs down, because if they want to work with us, they will give us better prices. I'm pleased to say that generally speaking, we've done really well, knock on wood. We've seen our construction bids come in roughly on average at what we had expected. Really good news. And I think the construction industry, obviously, vendors will always have things that they would like us to do differently. So I'm not going to say there's anything perfect, but I think there is in the construction industry a sense of enthusiasm, the momentum that they're seeing. All right, some of the less good news. I will turn over to Omar to talk about.
Dave, as the chair mentioned, David Womack is here as well. David is the lead for the entity that handles our debt capital markets and Wall Street facing activities. So I would like David to jump in here as well. The message here, I think, is good and bad. Just for everyone's benefit, the reason we show this chart is because the way we pay for most of our construction work is by selling bonds to investors, tax-exempt bonds that generate them a rate of return free of income taxes, and which allows us to borrow at a lower cost. And we borrow typically long-term for 10 to 30 years, which has the attraction of matching the liability to the life of the assets, because most of what we build or purchase is long-lived assets that have revenue-generating ability through charging for water and sewer use. So we borrow the money, then we pay it back slowly over time, using the money of the customers who use the assets pay us for purchasing water and sewer service. One feature of that is that a large part of the system's financial profile and the costs that we build into the water rates is the interest cost of the debt. And for that reason, we pay very close attention to borrowing costs in the market. The chart indicates, and probably everyone knows this from their credit card, their student loan interest rates, which if they have floating rate debt, rates have increased dramatically since 2021. As you can see, they've done a rate that's actually surprisingly quick, not something we've seen in a long time. And that always hurts, and that hurts us as well. Not on most of our debt, because most of our debt is fixed rate, it's kind of locked into the cost when we sold bonds years ago. But it does hit us on new debt that we issue at now higher rates, and it hits us on our small amount of variable rate debt we have. So that hurts, and that is part of the story behind the rate increase we'll talk about in a second. And that's not great news. We'd like to borrow for the cost, of course. And the good news is that since the fourth quarter of 2022, rates have started to trend sideways, so there's been some level of stabilization that very dramatic increase we saw in 21 going to 22 seems to have stabilized and gone sideways. But the only thing I flag is a little bit, the increase is dramatic. If you go to the far left of the chart, we're really sort of back to where we were in 2017 and 2018. So it feels tough, and it is part of the rate increase story. But it's not, if people remember the age of 10%, 12% borrowing rates, or even 5 or 6 years ago, it's still, what we're seeing in the markets now is not terrible. David does this every day, so if you have anything else you want to add?
I mean, the authority is fortunate that it enjoys ready market access. There's no problem accessing the market for us. In fact, we did a refinancing transaction in March that was probably the largest water and sewer transaction the system's ever done. It was about a $1.2 billion transaction, generated approximately $100 million in savings. So we can still refinance and save money, but rates are higher, and that's a reality we have to recognize. And we will continue to refinance debt opportunistically. But, as Omar suggested, rates are a lot higher than they were 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, it was very easy to refinance things for significant savings. The level of savings we can expect are diminished from where they were. Certain bonds that we would refinance are not able to be refinanced for savings that we leave them outstanding. But again, the authority is healthy, enjoys attractive credit ratings, and investors want to have our bonds. It's just that, unfortunately, it's just the world we're in. The market is demanding higher interest rates, and we'll live through it. We'll do the best job we can.
And I would just like to 2 or 3 quick comments on that. First, I've always appreciated the nature of our refinancing over the past 10 years. We've seen ebbs and flows of that, and I think you guys did an excellent job proactively looking for those opportunities, and we've seen where that's helped us keep the rates lower by the savings we've enjoyed. So appreciate that. I also think the historical context that the rates are up, but we're back to where we had been, and that we just had historically low rates that we were getting used to. So again, that context, and even as we're looking historically, how our rates, we saw double-digit rate increases 10 years ago. A lot of that trends to that we pay for our bonds. And then the third piece of just the connection to the credit rating. And I've seen other municipal authorities and water authorities throughout the country that are having issues with receivables and lack of payment and other concerns as inflation has gone up. Their credit ratings and the rating agencies have expressed concerns about their ability to recoup that funding and the seriousness with taking that. So I view our job as a board very aggressively and carefully protecting the excellent rating that you guys have ensured that we've had, and just want to applaud you on being able to maintain that and making sure, as we have a hearing on what the rate is, there's a direct connection, a through line to this chart of the increases that we see in the rates, but also our credit rating, and making sure that we all can pause and appreciate that.
And I just want to add, as a fellow bond seller on this debt, I just want people to really appreciate how hard it was to get 1.5 billion done last year. There was nothing really moving in the market, so that is a testament to the wonderful work and credit rating of the agency.
It's as if you closed right ahead.
Well, no, I just live this day to day.
One other thing, and probably an area that I have been talking about, and I know the mayor is increasingly concerned about, is that, as you all know, there is a lot of federal and state money now available to water utilities and for the kinds of investments that DEP makes. The bipartisan infrastructure law has a huge amount of money that goes to water infrastructure. The Inflation Reduction Act has a huge amount of money that should go to cities for the kinds of things that DEP does. And the voters of New York State last fall approved a $4.2 billion environmental bond act. Which means that, and because a large portion of the BIL and IRA federal money is actually channeled through the state governments and has to be distributed by the states, it is of increasing concern to us, and we believe it should be of increasing concern to the ratepayers of New York, that New York State is currently using discretionary tools to deny New York City access to a lot of this money.
So the Environmental Facilities Corporation, which is being used to distribute this, has chosen, and there's nothing in either of the federal laws that requires them to do this, to run the pots of money that you see here, and this is some of the amounts for clean water and for drinking water. Clean water, of course, being for the treatment side. They have chosen to apply a hardship policy, which restricts funding to disadvantaged communities, and by definition excludes any municipality with a population of more than 300,000. Now, you might ask, how many municipalities in New York State have a population of more than 300,000? And of course, the answer is 1. So basically, this is a rule imposed by the state government through their own discretion that is prohibiting New York City and DEP from accessing, as you see here, $111 million in grants and $116 million in zero-interest loans, $23 million for emerging contaminants. It is true we are generally in much better shape than many other water systems in terms of PFAS and other things, but nonetheless, there might be ways that we could take advantage of that. $43 million for drinking water, $31 million for emerging contaminants again. And the lead service line here, which is an interesting example, the state, we were quite outspoken about the need to have New York City get its fair share of this lead service line money. This is to replace lead service lines. We know that we have at least more than 100,000 lead service lines in New York City. There are another somewhere between 100 and 200,000 where we don't know exactly what the composition of the service line is. These are not, technically speaking, our problem because they are private property. However, in part at the urging of EPA, and also many electeds, we've developed an aggressive approach to how we could do lead service line replacement with federal money that is available. We put forward an application to this grant program. Again, was a total, as you see now in the second to last line, it was a total of $104 million split between grants and zero-interest loans. The state put out a set of criteria. They suspended the 300,000 person rule. DEP did a lot of work to identify very low-income census tracts in New York City that have nearly universal lead service lines, which means that we can get very good economies of scale because basically we'd be going in and changing all the lead service lines on a given block. So the cost per replacement is very low. The state did their analysis. We ranked very high in the analysis in terms of eligibility and meeting the criteria. And then the state decided that they were going to put an arbitrary limit that said that no municipality can get more than $10 million in grants and no municipality can get more than $14 million in loans. So instead of getting the roughly 50% of the pot that we had applied for, we will get about 22% of the pot. And as you will recall, New York City is 44% of the population, and importantly, New York City has 59% of the disadvantaged communities in the state. And all of this is set up on the pretense, and I will call it the pretense, that these are designed to ensure that it is disadvantaged communities that get the money. But since the majority of disadvantaged communities in New York State are within the 5 boroughs, we are the large majority-minority community in New York State. Take New York City out of New York State is 91% white. This is a direct redistribution of money away from us to others. An argument that the state has made is that because we are a large system, and therefore the savings, if they give us money, the savings do not directly accrue to lower the water rates of disadvantaged homeowners. What that means is they are saying that because we can increase the water rates on all water users, we should be ineligible for this federal and state money. I think it is wrong. We have been voicing that. I have sent very clear letters to EFC. We are told there's a response coming, but I haven't gotten it yet.
mayor, in response, so an interesting thing happened a couple of weeks ago where members of the Staten Island elected delegation, both the federal, state, and local elected officials wrote Mayor Adams a letter saying, please apply for this money, and we wrote back, the mayor wrote back saying, we'd love to, but we're not allowed. And so we're relying on people like Congresswoman Malliotakis and others to help us. We've been making the case to elected officials. Every elected official I talk to says this is contrary to their intention in voting for the BIL and the IRA. But we are going to have to make our case. I don't know what the right solution will wind up being, but this is really important because this directly means that any money that we cannot get hold of means we have to raise rates on New York rates.
Without getting into the details, have we looked at whether or not there is how we remedies in terms of deeming the regulatory decision as to the definition of disadvantaged communities to be arbitrary and capricious, or is there anything that we can do on that front?
I have asked our general counsel at DEP to look into whether we could file a lawsuit challenging this on the grounds for issues. I mean, I gotta tell you, I'm a historian. This is what red line means, right? You draw a line around a group of people and say you're not eligible for the same benefits that everybody else is solely because of where you live. That's what it is. Whether we can win a case in law on that, I don't know.
And the other remedy, of course, is our state delegation. How would we try to engage them if this is a state level decision to change that?
So we have been talking to them. You may know, they have been kind of distracted these last few months, so I can't say that we've gotten a lot of progress, but we will continue to keep this from loud.
Good luck.
Thank you. All right, moving right along. As you also know, we've been very focused over the last year, in fact, on the twin needs of ensuring affordability and creating the ability to assist those New York ratepayers who have genuine challenges paying their water bills, while at the same time we are increasing our efforts to collect water rates from those who have no problem paying. We have done a number of things to help those who struggle. I'll say more in a moment about our amnesty program, but we've delivered $11 million in interest forgiveness as part of that. We, and I give a lot of credit to Jeff and his colleagues, have been really aggressive at doing everything possible to take advantage of another federal program administered by the state, which I described to you, LIWAC, the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. Unfortunately, this program, the way the state has designed it, requires each individual homeowner to apply, and so part of what BCS has been doing is a constant effort to identify ratepayers that we think would be eligible and encourage them to apply. That's resulted in $22 million coming from the federal government through the state and being applied directly to the water bills of those low-income New Yorkers. Through one component of the amnesty program that you all approved at our last meeting, we've applied $4.2 million in what we call LIWAC Plus. That was a component of what we requested from you, where basically once a homeowner caps out and gets the full amount that's available under LIWAC, if they still owe money to us, we have been using those funds to go ahead and wipe the slate clean because they've done everything they can. They've gotten that federal money. Obviously, if they can qualify for LIWAC, they are income constrained, and so we've helped a number of people get into the black, which is, I think, good for everybody there. Another component of what you approved is a program for multifamily affordable housing, particularly HDFCs. We've used that to help 21 properties to the tune of nearly $2 million, and we have another 29 properties that we are working on agreements with, another potential $2 million.
the multifamily water assistance program that is something that you've endorsed for a couple of years now will have $12 million of bill credits this year. Similarly, the home water assistance program will provide $14 million, so that's a total of $26 million actually. It's a lot of money. We're doing a lot of work to try to help people who are in genuine need. And of course, the amnesty program, and Jonathan, you at a meeting when we proposed the amnesty, you asked some questions around cost benefit. Go ahead to the next slide, please. I'm pleased to say that it's been working really well. On the left-hand side, you see here one of the real innovations, and again, kudos to BCS for setting up a self-service approach, so that most people who do not have a complicated situation can go online and get themselves into the amnesty program directly without contacting a customer service agent. We actually have the call center data in here. We did not have it. Okay, because I will say one of the other things that BCS did, in keeping with this theme of going to the gym, I'm going to compliment you so often. of going to the gym and getting ready, is that Jeff and his team really ramped up hiring for our call center. In January, we intentionally delayed the start of the amnesty by 2 weeks so that we could get a final group of call center representatives on board and trained so they could be there when a large new wave of calls came. And so not only have we been able to handle through extended hours, we've had people volunteer for overtime, we've opened the call center on the weekends, we've opened the call center early, so we now start at 8 a.m. rather than 9 a.m. as we've done in the past. We have not only handled this large number of calls, but as you may recall, one of our disappointments in our mayor's management report criteria is that our call wait times were significantly elevated for the entire pandemic through about 2 months ago. Now I'm very pleased to say that our call center, our wait times, our drop calls are now basically at where they should be, so people are waiting less than 4 minutes on average, and we have what's the percent of drop calls? It's getting smaller and smaller.
It's very small, so it's 5%.
It's a very small percentage of drop calls, so I think we are back to where we need to be in terms of that customer responsiveness, thanks to good training, thanks to the focus that Jeff and his team put on it, and the fact that we've been able to hire a full complement of staff. What that has meant is that the amnesty, I think, has been very successful in achieving the goals. So as you see here, greater than 180-day AR has now been in a meaningful decline. And one of the things that we've seen is that a large number of the people who are taking full advantage of the amnesty with large balances are people who have not been in touch with us or paid a dime in 2 or 3 years. So we really are reaching back and bringing some people into compliance, which means that's money that might otherwise not have been available to us. Next slide, please. What you see here is the totals to date. This does not include last week. It does not include last week. So there's one more week, so we will be at over $60 million in this that we have brought in. And again, Jonathan, you asked what the trade-off was. We've forgiven about $11 million. We've gotten about $60 million. Given that this is AR that's 2+ years old, I think any customer-facing organization would say that's a pretty good recovery rate. And of course, we're not a bank. We don't need to make money on interest. We need to make money on, or gain money on water bills. So I think this is true what we should do. Altogether, it's about 13% of the seriously delinquent customers have taken advantage of the amnesty. Again, it's a small number looked at one way, but it's actually a pretty good uptake. And this is really important. Part of the amnesty was also to help people who have very small balances, right? Just because there's something psychologically important about getting people paid up in full. And with this, we have granted 79,000 customers the ability to get back into black with DP, which I think is a really big deal. Reflects our customer service and our public service mission. We
we're an investor-owned utility, maybe we want all that last, those last nickels and dimes, but that's not our goal here. And so I think this is great. Just by context, what that means is that going into this, we had more than 200,000 delinquent accounts. Cutting that by 80,000 is a significant number. It also allows us to more closely focus on those who are truly recalcitrant and owe us a lot more money.
One quick question, or maybe something for future meetings. It'll be really interesting to see how many of these people stay in compliance.
Yes.
Because of the amnesty. Obviously, you can't answer that now, but it would be, in a future meeting, I would love to see an update on that.
That's a good question. And I may have buried the lead that one of the things I was supposed to say on the previous slide is that with using the discretion, but I'd be interested in your feedback, the resolution that you enacted or adopted that authorized the amnesty also gave us the discretion to adjust the time. Given the fact that we are about to start the enforcement efforts, we expect to get some attention on that, and that this has gone so well, our intention is to extend the amnesty through the end of May. Again, that's something you've already authorized us to do, but you're nodding heads, seeing it, so continue as planned. So thank you for that.
Thank you for reporting on that specifically, the return on investment on that is really impressive.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased with how this has worked out. This is just some data around how it's different slices and dices of the data. You see across the city, and what's important, I argue, is this percent of total eligible principal. Basically, all of the boroughs have benefited equally from the amnesty. It's not overly skewed towards one borough based on the distribution of where the debt was. We've seen some variability in the different class, but one of the nice things is we've seen a lot of single and 1 to 4 family homes being able to take advantage of this, which is great. And again, in conjunction with the fact that we have several programs for low income, this also means that there are probably some people in that bucket who could well have paid, and this was a way, without brandishing the stick, we were able to lure them back into doing the right thing. I mentioned this already, but thanks to BCS's work, we've gotten $22 million from the state for the LIWAP, and we matched it with about $4 million. And then, as we said we were going to do, at the end of the amnesty program, we were going to start aggressively ramping up enforcement. And that we are doing, and I am pleased to say that this morning, DEP stickered its first 3 water shutoff notices since 2009. I will explain how we are prioritizing them, but we are prioritizing large balances, and this is an effort to get money in the door. So we are prioritizing buildings that we believe have the ability to pay based on the market value of the structure. Let's go back to 20, and so what we are going to do, we're going to ramp up somewhat slowly. The goal, of course, is never to shut somebody's water off. The goal is to get money in the door. The goal is to get people back into a pattern of paying. And so we are starting with a small number of well-publicized shutoffs. We intend to draw attention to this. We are focusing both on commercial and on single-family home customers. As I said, there will be a small number over time. If we need to, we will ramp up the number that we do. Just by way of context, there's a very clear process which we follow after, of course, all of the various delinquency notices and robocalls and everything we do when a building becomes eligible for shutoff. The first thing is they receive a certified letter telling them that they are on a shutoff list. We wait at least a week. Then we put a sticker on the door, and that sticker kicks off a 2-week clock. And so 2 weeks after the sticker goes on the door, DEP is able to go ahead and in most cases, we have to break through the street to physically disconnect the service line. And we will do that.
We do exempt, for a variety of reasons, certain properties from shut-offs, in part because of concerns for health and welfare. Most multifamily buildings are ineligible for shut-offs, and we will be using other means going after those. We have been, we will be ramping up our efforts to take legal action and file lawsuits. We have begun a really innovative effort, again, my thanks to BCS, to alert the residents and shareholders of co-ops and condos that have not been paying. We did a pilot that I think was very successful and hates that kind of shaming, puts pressure on the board, to put pressure on the management company. As many of you know, right now, the city council has still not given DEP and the Department of Finance the ability to sell liens, which limits the value of our placing of liens. If somebody isn't looking to refinance or conduct a transaction, the lien that we have for an unpaid water bill doesn't necessarily hinder them. But the one recourse that we have against these properties is the in rem process, which New York City has not used since the 1990s, since the lien sale process was adopted as frankly a better approach. If we have to, we will begin to investigate jointly with the Department of Finance whether in rem is something that has to be. Our prioritization is, as you see here, and as I said, it's focused on getting money from those properties that we think have chosen not to pay rather than have a genuine hardship. We've started with those entities that have the largest balances, and we prioritize those in reverse order as a fraction of the market value as reported by the Department of Finance. So what that means is we are starting out with properties that have very large balances, but it's a tiny fraction of what the property is worth. Again, a proxy for, we think, the ability to pay. And I'll reiterate what we always offer. Somebody who's facing with a shut-off notice can still call us. They are still eligible, potentially, for help from us, and they are certainly eligible with some money down of getting into a payment plan. So with this, it's not an all or nothing, pay 100% or we're shutting off your water in 2 weeks. This is really that final notice that says you have got to engage with us. You cannot be silent. You cannot just...
And you're not eligible for the amnesty program. It'll be gone.
Well, if they call us before May 31st, they might be. But the reality is there are costs, and certainly if you have to break concrete or asphalt and shut water off, they've imposed a cost on the rest of the ratepayers again. So we do not necessarily give them any kind of as-of-right access to the amnesty program. But given that the amnesty program runs until the end of the month, given that our whole point is we want the water payment, we're not necessarily worried about the interest payment. Again, we encourage everybody just to call us.
I know one piece, it says the government-owned properties are not subject to shut-off as part of your prioritization. I also remember from a prior meeting, there's a bunch of government-owned, other levels of government that owe the water system money. Is there a different strategy for that class of properties?
We are also getting very good at being annoying. So we are, the MTA has been a little busy, but now that the budget got passed in Albany, their financials outlook is a little more stable right now, so we certainly will be re-engaging with them. I'm actually very pleased to report we'll have definitive news on this in a couple of weeks, but we had a very good ongoing conversation with the New York State Department of Parks, and I compliment the commissioner there for being willing to engage with us on the efforts there. There are a number of others that we will be and are engaging with, but it is a different approach.
It is.
All right, and then on to the biggest news for the day. All of that is context for this. We are recommending that the Water Board adopt a 4.42% rate increase for fiscal year 2024. It is lower than the rate of inflation. It is lower than the comparables in the utility sector. And it is, well, again, there's a number of things here. We will certainly go through where the sources of our increased costs are. But I will point out the most important thing from my point of view, that 4.42%, as I mentioned earlier, includes an expectation that our enforcement will bring in a reduction of AR that we are budgeting. We are not budgeting overly optimistic on that score. So I believe this is still a conservative and responsible approach. But basically, if we were not doing the amnesty and enforcement, I think we would be at a 4.9 or a 5.4. It is only because of our work to reduce accounts receivable that we can come in with what I think is a relatively low rate request in the environment that we're operating in. And with that, I will ask Joe to talk about some of the specifics.
And one fine point on that, I think is really clear to make to anyone who's here or those who are following the news on this. If someone doesn't pay their bill, another ratepayer has to. And it gets paid on to those who are responsible actors, and that includes a number of people on fixed incomes, a number of affordable housing developers and others. If someone can afford to pay their bill and doesn't, that money doesn't go away magically. It gets paid by someone else who may not be able to afford it, but has to show with that burden. So really just as we go into our rate hearings and talk about the programs you guys have created, I hope that we can really emphasize that message.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Commissioner. And, next slide, slide 25 here. We have just a quick summarization of the sources of revenue and the uses of those funds that we're going to be raising. And this will be, laid out in more detail when we send around the sources of cash flow in the next week or so as we get ready for the rate hearings. We'll have this chart in much more detail. But you'll see first here we have, the need for O&M, allocation of $180 million. The biggest piece of that right now would have been the labor settlement, the DC 37 labor settlement, which was reached in March by the Adams administration, which called for 4 years of 3% going back to fiscal year 2021, and then a final year of 3.25%. Those compounded are, adding to the needs of what's in the system, both for the immediate term, because we have to pay both for this year as well as the retroactive that's going to be here going forward as well. Then there's some other slight costs there as well for chemical treatment and billing software upgrades that we continue to make. And, there again, this is one of the needs due to staffing shortfalls and just the putting the new system out there as well. There's also the additional need for $297 million in debt service costs that are related to the, enhanced capital program as you saw previously. A small increase on the water board and water authority's budget, and then a, change to the pay-as-you-go, the cash finance capital continues into $72 million, $481 million in total there. Of what we have, we're going to say we have $178 million for, increase forecast based on the prior year, being fiscal year 22, that's versus 23. And then we also have a increase in the budget of revenue. As the Commissioner pointed out earlier, we are ahead of plan this year, and we also are expecting to be able to have that funding from the amnesty. And then the other, that piece down there is an allowance for conservation on $69 million and some other non-recurring revenue sources. So that leads us to a net need of $168 million, which approximately approaches 4.42% of, brings us to need $4.2 billion for fiscal year 2020. I'll pause for questions. Again, if there's any more, we could also, that will be in the cash flow analysis in more detail. Coming out later.
And just on the allowance for conservation, how does that match what we were projecting? I know that some of our numbers in the past have fallen lower than we expected as we were looking at upstate conservation ahead of some of our water shutoffs.
We generally, and we also have here our agents, the rate consultant, Ed Marcus Mello, We've generally been seeing about 1% a year. It was more when we went through the pandemic because it was just such a move out of the city, some people working from home, so you had that variation I think we had talked about a year or two ago. That is sort of stabilized out. Now, you still do see some of that bigger increase on the single-family homeowners usage of working from home and less on the, in the office market, but it's still running about 1% or so that we're getting there. And Ed, I don't know if you want to add anything more from your end.
So we've applied that 1% to the metered customer base, not just in '24, but also going out into the out years as well.
I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. And then, if you want to go to the next slide, there we have what this means for our ratepayers. So the average single-family charge for 70,000 gallons per year, currently at about $1,041. That will go up to a proposed $1,088. So that's an increase of $3.84 a month. For the average multifamily, you're going to see a monthly increase of $2.85. Those on the multifamily conservation program, those will go up to $2.18. And we're continuing to keep the minimum charge as is, so there's no increase on that. Which, as you noted, is those people using on average 90 gallons per day or less. Mainly, benefiting seniors and those who have smaller households. Next, we have the continuation of exemption program. And I think this is pretty self-evident as to what the board approved last year, so an extension of that, we enhanced them from 20 million to 30 million. I don't know if you want to add any more on this.
No, I'm just like, we're proposing the board reauthorize the package programs and they reauthorize the 50% funding expansion that we did in FY '22. So it would be not only the programs with the funding expansion that we had done 2 years. So the programs in there expanded.
So that's an incremental 10 million is what you're talking about, the expansion?
Yeah, the 10 million is incremental in '22 and '23.
It's keeping it flat.
Yeah, it's keeping it flat to last year with the expansion built in.
Next slide. And then here we have our city comparisons to 30 March city average. And again, your city continues to be an area where we're coming in below, we're probably in the median about those, but, overall, we look at the average, we're at 1,041 versus 1,309 for fiscal year 2023. I don't want you to take this slide.
So at this meeting, we talked about 2 different rates. The in-city rate, which is financially, in terms of the interest level, the main event. We, as most people will remember, also sell water to municipalities and water districts north of the city that are located in counties, mostly Westchester County, where we own water supply, water distribution assets. And they're allowed to purchase the water at a wholesale rate. It's a different rate framework than what we have in the city. Because it's a cross-border municipality rate, it's subject to review by the State Department of Environmental Conservation, and there's a framework and a calculation methodology that's been in place for various iterations for about 30 years, and it's well understood. But it's a more complex and kind of regulatory intensive rate than the in-city rate, which is more of a traditional pure cost-based cost recovery rate. What we're proposing to do this year is to increase the main rate, the allowance quantity rate, or colloquially the entitlement rate, by 6.76%. And that's the rate at which most of the water we sell to these towns and water districts pay for their water. Now, that because of a quirk in an old state law, most of the water that these towns buy can be purchased at that rate, the allowance or entitlement quantity rate. There's a small amount of water, which is the amount of water a town buys in excess of a per capita threshold number. And we charge a second rate for amounts in excess of that sort of tier 1, that block 1, baseline amount of water. What we're suggesting to do with the excess amount or the sort of the non-allowance amount is consistent with in past years. It's to increase that second rate by the in-city rate increase of 4.42%. That's always been, it's been done on the theory that we didn't sell it to them, we sell it in the city. That's the opportunity cost of the rate. So we thought, where we have more rate-making discretion, the cost of price is more inherent in the in-city. But the headline is for the allowance quantity rate 6.76%, and then for the higher levels of water consumption of 4.48%.
And how do you arrive at the 6.76?
So what you need, this is what Ed does all day, but we take the cost of DEP's operations when we look at the capital budget, and the trick is to isolate the portion of the cost that's just water supply. So water treatment, in-city water distribution, water supply assets that are in a place where they couldn't supply north of the city because of their geographic location are removed from the cost base. We need to isolate those pure water supply costs. And the proportion of depending on the expense you look at, the portion is usually between 15 and 20% of the operating cost. But Ed works with the budget department, does a lengthy study figuring out what portion of DEP's expense base, in particular Bureau of Water Supply, is dedicated to water supply costs. And that's a lengthy budgeting exercise. He does something similar on the capital budget side, which is a bit of a different calculation because the operating costs look fairly similar year to year because the composition of the agency doesn't change that much year to year. On the capital budget side, it does change a little more rapidly because so much of the capital spending, if you went back 10 or 15 years ago, was focused on water supply. And because of all the good work they did that, the capital budget become progressively more wastewater treatment or CSO oriented in city. So the amount of the debt service or the amount of cash for paying cash for construction work that gets allocated to water supply goes up a little bit each year. And there's a bit of a variance as well with the amount of discretion they might use just to give the excess revenues they use to pay cash for construction work. So they look at those two costs, a portion for operating as water supply and a portion for capital that's more of the city assets. And then they do in a way it's the trickiest part, which is the estimate of how much water actually gets purchased by these communities, which have their own local groundwater sources and lakes and agricultural sources, or in some cases sell to each other. But they look at those three pieces, the estimate of water supply and the operating, the capital, and the forecast for water consumption, and that gives you the cost and service per unit of water and backs into the rate increase.
And just to remind the context, this is approximately $80 million, $4.2 billion.
It's a good example. The instant you start dealing with the state, it's just to the commissioner's point, the instant the state becomes involved, it becomes more complex.
Okay.
Hi, just a question. This is maybe it's like a stupid question, but so for the isolating the cost of the water supply, so this is unsubsidized, right? All the things that's happening here.
Correct.
So water is purely kind of at cost. And then for those non-New York City residents, that's also a cost, or is there some sort of additional charge for those outside of New York
It
City?
depends on what their municipality or service provider decides to do. Most of this is a wholesale cost to them, so they can add on, whether it's like the city of
For
Scarsdale.
us, are we charging additional fee, or is it we're charging a wholesale cost?
There's no profit margin, there's no return on capital, it's a pure cost recovery. The localities charge, they add their own, they add their water supply, and they blame us sometimes.
They may have treatment costs or other measures that they're doing as well.
But how we're charging them is at cost to us.
Correct.
That's a, it's operating pure.
This is the public hearing schedule, and we're back to the traditional format, so all in-person hearings are going to be in all 5 of the boroughs. We'll be in one hearing north of the city for the upstate rate for the regulated rate up in Valhalla, the DEP offices there. But the hearings will take place between May 24th and May 31st. And then we're still calendaring the board's next meeting for the through deliberation and the vote on the budget rates, but it's likely to be the second or third week of June when we come back. And then, in terms of, we'll have a lot of information coming out about how to register to testify at one of the hearings, or how to submit written questions or written testimony. But the preferred way, if you want to register or if you want to submit testimony, the best way to get the information to us is to the board's email address, nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov. You can call, you can mail, you can show up on the day if you want to, and register on site. But I would advise, if you want to testify, pre-register by email, and if you want to send written testimony, send it ahead of time by email, and then on the day of, you can provide whatever you need to. If you register in advance and get us that digital copy, it makes it a lot easier for us to make sure the board will see it and have time to digest it.
With regard to the meetings, the borough meetings, maybe it's a question for Al. I don't believe we have to have a quorum of the board for the borough meetings.
No.
Okay, all right. All members, of course, are encouraged to attend as many as possible, but if we can't get more people, it's going to be okay.
But all the testimony, I think the transcript, whatever, are going to be available there.
Are there questions?
Thank you for this, very thorough.
I'll make a motion. I'm not sure. Hearing no to the question, whether there are questions, may I have the motion to adjourn now?
Second.
Thank you very much. It's been probably moved and seconded. Are there any, is there any opposition?